sithatha elithuba lokupoposha into kokubana siqala iphulo lokufunda nokufundiswa kwabantwana ngendlela abazawukwazi ukuqonda ngayo amagama nendlela abazawukwazi ngayo ukwenza unxibelelwano phakathi kwalento ayifundayo nalento anolwazi lwayo. So i-program ke esiphetheyo silisebe lezemfundo apha eMzantsi Afrika, but ke namhlanje besisenza ukuyilontsha njengephondo ukwenzela uba izokwazi ukumelana nezanzwili zexesha zalapha eprovinsini. Sizayiqala ke ezikolweni, otishala banikwe zonke izixhobo zokusebenza, bancediswe ngokuba balolongwe bakwazi ukumelana nale campaign nale program. Eyona nto ke siyifunayo, sifuna abantwana bakwazi ukufunda, bakwazi ukubhala, bakwazi ukudibanisa unxibelelwano phakathi kwezinto ezibangqongileyo nokukhula kwengqondo yabo ngokucinga, bakwazi ukumelana nayo yonke into engenza babe ngabantu abafanelekileyo nabantu abanokwazi ukuba ngabantu behlabathi, njengoba sesisazi uba ingxaki yehlabathi le ayoyalapha ephondweni ingeyoyalapha eSouth Africa kuphela.
Yeah, we are here in the Eastern Cape. The Department of Education in the Eastern Cape is launching the Eastern Cape Reading Strategy, which is a strategy that is responding to the bigger campaign by the Department of Basic Education and the sector in general of the Read to Lead campaign, and that campaign goes even beyond the schooling. So we are responding to the research that was made because some of the learners could not read with comprehension, especially at grade 4 and at the age of 10 years. So now what the province is doing is to build up on the national campaign, to have a provincial campaign, to go right to the school. And I love it because it's a bottom-up approach. It starts from a school, second district, then province.
Exhibitor. Xa sizo-exhibitor sizobonisa incwadi specifically as an indigenous language ezike zilapha ephondweni, isiXhosa kunye nesisuthu. Ngoba singulamqolomba thina bakuthethwa ngazo, singulamqolomba ukhupha noproducer i-content ezincwadini zabantwana from esikolo, from lower phases, which is the foundation phase up to FET phase.
Apha kwa-PSC sinencwadi ezahlukahlukeneyo, especially for reading, because we know how important reading is for a child. So the book, for example, they will learn that it's an A for apple, then B for bouncing ball, and then K for clever cat. So by learning that and associating, they will never forget how to pronounce these alphabets.
Incwadi zethu singu-Cambridge University Press sizibhala ngeelwimi zonke ezikhoyo eMzantsi Afrika. Ezike ndiziphetheyo phambi kwam zezesiXhosa kuba silungiselela abantwana bamaXhosa e-Eastern Cape ukwenzela into yoba bakwazi ukufunda nokubhala besebenzisa ezi ncwadi zakwaCambridge. Siphuhlisa ufundo kakhulukazi.
Lisuka kwa-Global MBD Africa Publishing. U-Global MBD Africa Publishing ke sineencwadi esinazo zabantwana uqala kwa-grade R uyotsho ku-grade 12. Into yoba ibe ngoopopayi, ibe imifanekiso yoopopayi ukuze abantwana bakukhuthalele, bakuthande ukufunda. We are trying to enhance the reading experience and also making abantwana into yoba bafunde for pleasure. So incwadi yethu lena, but ke ngokuna siyifake kwi-app.
Because if we fail to have a firm foundation of proper reading, we won't have people using reading as a way of empowering themselves, not to empower the society. With these words, you are all welcomed. Feel free. Enjoy the beautiful coastline of the Eastern Cape, in particular East London.
We always pride ourselves in the Eastern Cape that we initiate. We are a think tank in terms of developing all these initiatives. And I want to believe without any fear of contradiction that Today marks one such day when we are almost leading in the country in responding to the call by the President of the country, to the call by our mother department, the Department of Education, in ensuring that we do implement a structured strategy for promotion of reading in our country.
I'm from the National Department of Education, and there I'm responsible for research, monitoring, and evaluation. And we've done a lot of research focusing on early grade reading, as well as early grade maths, but especially early grade reading. And I'm going to speak on this topic of what works and what scales. So it's kind of a review of the evidence and calling us to actually back to a tradition of evidence-based system-wide programs in the country. And I think just to say up front that looking at the draft strategy that has been, that will be launched today, I'm very encouraged that it does seem to be heavily informed by research and by evidence. And I think it really will serve as a good foundation to inform all the programming and support in the years to come in the Eastern Cape. The recommendation is that we do need better research and evaluation on something. So it's okay to do things on a small scale, but let's do them in a way that really contributes to the knowledge base that actually informs scale. And I think we need to do this focusing on some of the very key areas. ECD, the quality of ECD is a big one. Numeracy as well, remedial approaches in grades 4 to 9. We're going to hear in the next presentation, I think, about some of the learning losses that happened during the pandemic. I think initial teacher education is a big opportunity, especially given that we are expecting a wave of teacher retirements in the years to come. So aside from reading, those are some key areas in the system. And we need to use better evaluation methods. I think as government departments, we should insist on when evaluations are done, or when interventions are done, that there must be evaluation accompanying that so that we get the lessons from those interventions. The third recommendation then is that we do need to return to a South African tradition of sustained system-wide reforms rather than these piecemeal pockets of interventions. And I say return to a South African tradition because I think that is what led to some success over the last 25 years. It's interventions like the DB workbooks, like the school feeding program, like the no-fee policy, like the funding reforms, like big interventions, big shifts that have borne fruit, and there's a long way to go, but we've done a number of those very bold interventions that are widely regarded as successful. The workbook intervention is a good example. And we need maybe a new round of those kinds of interventions. And when it comes to reading, the good news is we do not have quite a base of evidence. So we've done small-scale impact evaluations. We now know that a structured learning program of lesson plans, reading materials, and especially good quality professional support, quite direct support to teachers, that can have a big impact. We also could further explore the use of teaching assistants or educator assistants, especially given that there is quite a lot of momentum behind that initiative now with the Presidential Youth Employment Initiative. The trick now is to use those education assistants in ways that not only give them employment, but that also improve learning. And there are ways that program can be tweaked to strengthen the impact on learning. Lastly, I think what we need to do is we need to complement all these forms of support to the classroom and to teachers with a focus on the right learning outcomes. And in the next presentation from my colleague Mpumi, she's going to speak partly about reading benchmarks in all the African languages that as the National Department we've been leading the development of. And I think that provides a good opportunity to focus the attention of everyone on what levels of reading do children need to be at in grade 1, in grade 2, in grade 3, in grade 4. Because if everyone's focus is on the right things, it creates more appetite for the intervention support, more take-up of available forms of support. It's also a low-cost thing to do. Getting attention on learning outcomes, trying to make people care more about reading outcomes, that in itself is not a high-cost thing. And it can just add strength to the existing forms of support, some of which do cost quite a bit of money. So that is it. Let me end by saying congratulations on the launch of the strategy. I think it's an exciting development. I really do want to compliment the province on this step. I think it's a great example that we'll be also talking about back in the National Department, and all the best with implementing it. The trick is in implementation, so looking forward to seeing that. Thank you very much.
I'll be speaking about learning losses that we had in the pandemic, just equipping us to have a shared understanding about what the pandemic cost us, and then having some reflections on a way forward in light of the strategy that you have. So, as Stephen has mentioned, South Africa has participated in several international assessments, including the Progress in Reading Literacy Study. This stat is a known stat. It's from 2016, where we found that 78% of grade 4 learners were not reading for meaning in any language. They were assessed in their home language, a language that they had been exposed to for the first 3 years of the foundation phase. That being said, though, South Africa was on the steepest improvement rate, one of third steepest in terms of PILs, in terms of international assessments. So while we are at the bottom, we have seen extremely large improvements. And recently, Nankamso and I have been working on analyzing this data, and we find that ECDOE is one of the big languages that contributed to these improvements. So there's something that is going right in Eastern Cape regarding reading in those early years. And so when the pandemic hit us, we were struck with a lot of threats about keeping schools open or reopening schools. We know in South Africa we enjoy a very active civil society, and there were even court cases that were put against the minister and the department against reopening schools because of the risks of the pandemic. But this needed to be balanced with what we now know about schools. We were at risk of eroding 2 decades worth of gains, as I've shown you in the PIL study. We already had lost high contact time. And in the case of South Africa, we now know that learning largely happens in school, in the classrooms. We're not a country yet where learning happens at home. Learning is largely the responsibility, or it's being delivered by.
How do we then track our progress so far? So we have teaching, we have training and support, but how do we see how much we have gone? And I'm very, very happy that Mrs. Mhaule had, and soon to be Dr. Mhaule, has soon outlined what it is for us in terms of testing. We can have the EGRA. I saw it on the strategy. But now, how do we know where the learners are there? This is really simply put in terms of getting use of benchmarks, really adopting them, not just taking them as a directive, but seeing how they can truly work for us here. Because we want to know how far we are in our goal in getting all of the learners to read for understanding. Here, I'd like to say, once we've seen improvement, so there are opportunities for us to improve learning outcomes. We should be measuring where we are at each step. The province has done well. Thank you.
We start good things in the Eastern Cape and we decide to drop them and go back to our old ways of doing things. I think we have heard here that in terms of data collection, in terms of these anthologies, we have set up something very good and is making a serious dent. Here le nto sicengwayo ngoku, incane sicenga. Kuthiwe ziniyibambe, ningayiyeki. I think even the tone indishukumisile mfundisi, le tone. Isengathi ngumuntu wecawe unala tone yecawe aphilayo to your soul. Tinibambe, ningayiyeki. And I thought that she's going to proceed to other slides. Wavalwa siyeka nje. Just like that.
The purpose of us to be here, ukuthi sizothetha ngendoba singenza njani na ukuthi abantwana bakwazi ukufunda, and read for meaning. So I decided here to include that phrase ethi intsingiselo yegama. So it matters who's teaching it, and it matters what is taught. What do I mean about that? Plan City, it matters who's teaching it. Ingaba abatishara bafundisa isiXhosa. Kufanele babe kanti bafundisa isiXhosa, batrain ukufundisa isiXhosa. Kuthanda nto abantwana bafundisa ngabo bengakwazi ukubhala.
Over the past 20 years, South Africans have become increasingly concerned about the poor reading ability of school-going children. Several local and international tests of reading achievement show that our learners are not reading at the required level in their home language or in the language of learning and teaching. And so, after the release of the PIRLS test in 2016, the President announced, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa announced in his State of the Nation address that one of government's 5 fundamental goals for the next decade is that all children should be able to read for meaning by age 10. So in response to this call by the President, the Minister of Education and the Department, the Minister of Education and the Department of Basic Education developed a national sector reading implementation plan for 2019 to 2023. And the Eastern Cape Department, that is us, our reading strategy and campaign, hashtag, there's a hashtag to our reading strategy, and it is hashtag improve reading to improve learning. So our reading strategy and campaign, hashtag improve reading to improve learning, 2022 to 2030, goes beyond the call of the President to ensure that ensuring all children aged 10 can read for meaning, to include all learners from grades 1 to 9. As the need for improving reading has become more dire in the aftermath of the learning losses suffered through the COVID-19 pandemic. You've heard the research against mentioning how we've lost some learning in the last 2 years. So Ms. Henda Mhaule from Voices of Africa, she came to hand over to the principals that are here. If we can just have one principal, I remember the lady, just as a symbol, there's a box please, just to hand over. Ms. Henda Mhaule is from Voices by Africa, and the 3 books that are in here, it is embedded with life values, decision-making skills, answering the need to convey a message of hope through relevant stories to address societal challenges the youth are facing in South Africa. The first book, Whitney's Kiss, deals with the AIDS pandemic, teenage pregnancies, peer pressure. Whitney's Escape, Book 2, deals with the wave of drug abuse and how it steals the future of our youth. Whitney's Fortune, Book 3, explores and develops entrepreneurial skills. So, Ms. Mhaule, can you just please hand it over to a principal as a symbol? 50 principals will get those books for grade 7, 3 books each. In Sanbonani. To speak at the end, it's so painful because all what I've written here has been said. I said, my God. So mine is just to say, the reading strategy is officially launched. And we need to run with the implementation. All of them were talking about implementation. Yes, we agree about the resources, but let's not put the resources as a stumbling block. The little that we have, let's get the strategy running. And that will help us. And the CFO is the one who's agreeing the most with me. And she's correct. We should not make resources a stumbling block. We have our resources, which are teachers. And we make sure that even if they cut the budget, we don't tamper with that budget.
because that one we always say you cannot replace a teacher. A teacher must always be there in front of learners. HOD put it correctly to say during our time, we the afternoon class, during our time, it was grade R, those, because we are a bit cleverer than others, they say, no, this one must go to school. Even if you are not yet at sub A, they will allow you. It happened with me. They allow you to go and attend, then you are in the same class with sub A and sub B. Same class, one teacher teaching all subjects, starting from, and teaching you to hold a pen. And here we are today. So I'm saying, let resources not be a stumbling block. As long as we have a teacher, something good will come out of it. So this month, October, it's a month for teachers. And we must celebrate teachers. As a teacher myself, I always hate it when people will always hammer on teachers. We saw that during COVID-19, people could not want to stay with their children. They wanted their children to stay with a teacher, and yet the teacher is useless. How can you want your child to stay with somebody who's useless? It means that teachers are good. That's why parents were so stressed, devastated, and some were even admitted because they couldn't stay with their own children. We correctly said that literacy and mathematics are to become one apex priority of the 6th administration, as it is even now. After launching the National Reading Coalition and ushering in the 6th administration post the national election, we launched the Integrated National Reading Sector Plan, which this plan by the Eastern Cape is responding to the national sector plan. We really appreciate and want to thank the Eastern Cape and the Department of Education in the Eastern Cape for the gigantic steps they have taken. We all need to play our parts. We must socialize all our learners into becoming lifelong readers. We cannot succeed in getting the nation to read on our own as government. That's why we need all our partners to form part of us and to be part of us. That's why we're supporting the President's call for all the South Africans to be a reading nation. We must support our learners in the reading for academic purposes, for knowledge, and for enjoyment. Today, we call upon all South Africans in general and people of the Eastern Cape in particular to never again regard reading as a portion of education, but to take reading as education. As I indicated when I started speaking, that I, in my capacity as Deputy Minister for Basic Education in South Africa and in the Eastern Cape today, officially launched the strategy. Thank you very much.
Sino MC onje, Sino MC onje, Sine Sebelinje. That's Dr. Zagaza from Nalibali. And it ends with a story. Thank you very much. And bye-bye. Get your resources at the door. Thank you.
So one of the things that we did was take some of the modules from the road course and develop an online platform where teachers can actually do an online course self-study where they drive themselves, hence the birth of the Reading Academy. And in sharing all these lessons, like remember what I say, we're not doing anything for ourselves. What we do is feedback whatever we're doing to the provincial officials that we work with. And what has happened from there is that they really liked this idea, and knowing that all the teachers had laptops, etc., they said, okay, you know what, let us offer it to our teachers, and they've done that in cohorts. Currently, they've trained up to 1,614 teachers have been enrolled. That is the online reading course. The next thing is that, remember I said in Limbamba we were testing for TAs, right? teacher assistants. So those are youths who are between the ages of 18 to 28, and they need to have a matric. If they've got more than that, it's great, as long as they fall between the ages. And what we do with them then is train them with our material so that they can better assist the teachers in the classroom.
I think we believe it offers huge potential to support a strategy like this, but it isn't a silver bullet. It is complex to implement, and it needs an integrated strategy, and it's not just about putting devices and connectivity into schools. But from our experience, we are confident that through effective implementation, we can use technology to make a significant difference and improve learner outcomes and ensure that our learners are ready for the future of work and the digital economy. If we talk a little bit about impact and results, what having connected schools has enabled us to do is to also start looking at digital assessments. And we've looked at the results of 14,000 learners that we tested at the end of 2019 through what we called our e-quiz. And we're seeing significant improvement in results of over 12% in terms of learners who have used the program versus those who haven't used the program. So I think there further work and examination that we want to do in terms of the impact results, but also wanted to highlight the use of digital testing tools that could also be rolled out at scale in schools to support the assessment.
So just briefly about what we do as the ZNX Foundation, we took a focused approach in saying that we are not working throughout the schooling system. So we work in the early grades. Our projects start from grade R up to grade 4, and we work in the senior phase, specifically in grades 8 and 9. As I've already said, we are focusing on mathematics and languages. We work with school managers, teachers, both in service and ITE, and we work in 4 provinces specifically, and Eastern Cape is one of our core provinces. And we've been having interventions in the Eastern Cape since our inception in 1994. And we have been moving forward with the changing strategies, both in the province and also at the ZNX Foundation. And most of our work that is at national level is mostly for systemic projects that are led by the Department of Education. Otherwise, our target provinces is Gauteng, Western Cape, Eastern Cape, and KwaZulu-Natal. But we, as the ZNX Foundation, we want to say we are willing and we are committed to work hand in hand and also walk side by side with the ECDOE and also our other stakeholders that are in the room and some that are not here in improving the reading outcomes. We have just come to say we are committed, we want to work with you, and we also recognize that our education system is actually at a time of a need, specifically in the improvement of our long-term endeavors. Thank you very much.
In the name of Christ, amen. For starters, let me render my utmost heartfelt gratitude for this opportunity afforded to these teacher unions as social partners to be amongst in the midst, especially to speak on behalf of us all. You would remember, would say nothing about us without us and for us. Hence we say, as people of South Africa, let's join hands, unite and fight the pandemic of learner being unable to read. It is against this background that as trade unions, we have joint ventures with schools that every Friday of every week is drop all and read for an hour. We wish to humbly request the Department of Education to intensify monitoring the implementation by schools of drop all and read. We also encourage our educators to allow learners to read, and also read as if there's no tomorrow, for enjoyment, of course. We also, Department of Education, request you to assist schools to train young librarians so that they can be capacitated and assist in this process of borrowing and bringing back the school. Siyabulela, Inkosi.
I like that Friday thing, that campaign. Popular campaign. Iyakufuna uhoywa ngumuntu wonke. Ayoka Satu, ayoka Nabdosa, yet. We must own up to that initiative as a collective of all the partners in the province. See profile. We market it, but as part of the things that we'll have to take home out of this launch, that's one of the issues that we need to take home and see how we can take it forward.
This is the framework of what we're supposed to do, and this is the scope of what we're supposed to do. If I were to challenge any one of you to tell me a Khoisan alphabet they know off their hearts, including Master, including Genevieve Kokman, they can't move. And I should think we have a responsibility because it's now an official language. In the Eastern Cape, we have a very huge and a very big community of the Khoisan that is on the revival. It's not only Sotho, Xhosa, there's small communities that are official, part of the official languages. So our scope is almost broader. And in this case, we also include the sign language and the braille. And if you look at these were originally marginalized forms of communication that are brought back into the mainstream. Because the question is really, how do you open up their horizons in order for them to see through the window if you don't allow them and give them the tools to be able to interface with the broader world? Where there is a big problem is the fact that over years, some of these languages were killed, to non-existence. And our duty is to start to rebuild the vocabulary, to rebuild, the whole construct of these languages, let alone, we have not even been able, to establish algorithms that allow us to read them through either, your cell phone, your Microsoft programs. So we still have a long way to go. But in this conference, I should think our main goal is how do we make sure that all of these children, by the time they leave grade 10, they can read and write with meaning and with comprehension. There's a mistake it will be that we normally make is that our ability to memorize, at that time we're doing sub A, sub B, is that we're also reading with meaning and we could read with comprehension. And more often than not, we were really into rote learning. And early in the morning against the wall, you start, and at times you'll find is that what killed the capacity of our education system to produce, thinking and critical individuals is the fact that 80% of our learning was rote learning. Nobody says it's wrong to use rote learning to teach, but what is important is that there should be an array of methods of teaching children on how to deal with information. Data mining, data searching, data analysis, critically review of data. And that's what education is supposed to be promising to all of these kids, so that by the time they get to university, they can deal with their own information management and information management approaches. And in this instance, this is where our biggest problem is. We put them up in international benchmarks, and when they come in there, sometimes they fall short because the construct is in a memory form, and there's no expansion of associations, what it means, So also the structure of our language has lost its essence at times, especially you can look at idioms, you can look at, your ways of speaking, that has been lost in the process. So we're now into township languages. And moreover, people are beginning to say, let's use, your WhatsApp language as the appropriate means of communication. But the point of the matter is, really, what can we achieve within the context of a reading plan, taking into account all of these needs? And this is where our biggest need is. We have to come together, colleagues, to start talking about Sotho, production of Sotho teachers, teaching of Sotho in schools. We have to come together to start talking about Afrikaans, and as Mr. Jack was saying, including your Afrikaans and English, we have a depth of talent and teachers in those spheres. This strategy is premised on this theory. Mother tongue education is the most effective strategy in building a successful foundation phase for the poor and the rural children of the Eastern Cape. And if you look at this, there's proven research and it's research-based. There's no way that we cannot understand it. Then secondly, I should think Nelson Mandela Institute at Fort Hare came up with a formulation that was very interesting to me, the concept of educational knowledge project and its accountability to the main language stream in schools. You will find that 80% of our children speak isiXhosa at home, but we subject them to a schooling system that starts them in English and then they get lost in the process. I was visiting a school, I was doing some work with Senex Foundation some years ago, and we were visiting a school in New Brighton where they were using English as language of teaching and learning in grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. And you could get a sense that, because it was fashionable that our kids must speak English, there was no real theory on knowledge acquisition, the role of language in knowledge acquisition, embedding certain skills, at certain things. So there wasn't of that. So you will find that many of our schools make policy choices based on what parents perceive to be good. If your child is speaking English, to you that child is brilliant. And you could listen to many parents, even in shops when they go with their kids. They don't speak isiXhosa. No, boy, don't touch it, boy. Then you begin to realize you begin to realize that we are slaves, and we are slaves in a situation, and a complex situation, where children are supposed to understand structure and relations. And as a result of that, when then they call you to the school to say, hey, umntana wakho is not making the grades, uqale ufuna i-department apho ikhoyo, hayi umntana makanofeyisha. The point of the matter is that language is very azilwe, but the battles that we fight on this language issue. Parents make a very interesting decision. They take their children into an English medium school in the middle of nowhere when they are not coping. They are told that umntana wakho has repeated once, repeat so take the child to a special school. Umntana is not fit for any special school, but the point of the matter is that the foundation is lost. And this is where we are. We're trying to align, as the department, the knowledge project with the language structure of children, particularly mother tongue. And this is what we'll be emphasizing in our discussion with all of you. There are two processes, MSc, that are very important, and this is where people must understand clearly. There is incremental introduction of African languages, which means by the time they get to grade 9, they must speak a language other than English or Afrikaans, which means in this case, Sotho or any other language. And then the second one is the concept of mother tongue-based education, which means providing teaching and learning in a mother tongue throughout the system. That is different from foundation phase, grade 3, then grade 4, they switch to English. Mother tongue-based education is exploring the concept of developing mother tongue as a language of instruction. In this case, we're trying to manage both terms of policy as we launch this reading strategy. In the first instance, we are emphasizing that between grades 1 and grade 3, they must be able to read and write in their mother tongue. Because once you get to grade 4, it has to do with the resource capacity of the state to provide that. especially teachers who are well trained, you know. So it's going to be very important that we manage that transition between mother tongue in the foundation phase and the introduction of mother tongue-based education in grades 4 up to grade 9. The department did pilot it in Kofinvaba, where we were looking at Ingciba second and where we were piloting mother tongue-based education at Ingciba. And it became very clear that there are 4 fundamental things that are very important. The first one is the resourcing of the project, because you need to invest massively on production of teachers, textbooks, and all of that. So it's going to be very important that we manage it with care, otherwise it's a very sensitive. Be that as it may, we don't put obstacles, we have to move. The first step is the most positive thing that we must undertake. Our attack as Eastern Cape is professional development of teachers. That's our main attack. And this must have an impact on the classroom practice, which in turn must have an impact on learning outcomes, and also then ultimately it must have an impact on teachers' beliefs and attitudes. Colleagues, if teachers don't believe in any program, it won't happen. So if teachers believe, it can happen. You know, I went to a primary school where it was almost fashionable to start speaking English. What am I doing, class? I am sitting on the table. What am I am sitting under the table. And you could sense that, you know, all teachers were obsessed that our children are top of the brand. And you know, higher primary schools, they were just grabbing us like peanuts, you know. Then you begin to feel that, no. If teachers are into the idea, the school will run with it. And in this case, if we can invest in teacher development, that's why we are aligning our resources in the department around teacher development. This is where we need our social partners, particularly teacher unions. This is where we need the relationship that we have with private funders that are coming in, especially the corporate. It's going to be very important that we share resources, we share strategies.
I just wanted to thank not just the branch, Prare, but the thinking tanker behind this strategy. Can I tell you a secret? This is the definition of the power relations in the society and in the continent in general. Once you talk language, culture, religion, and formulate a strategy on how to deal with it, apho yakhona uzawuya kwi-power relations kwi-society. Ufikile ke ngoku apho ileta yakho ibibhalele khona. Because ingxaki zabanayo yokuqala into yobana abantu that are used on the dominant language are going to find it difficult to accept the new entries, and are going to find it difficult to accept that it's not God's given that there is monopoly of language in societies. It's by design of humankind. That's why I always say, SG, le department yokucinga. Ayikho indawo okucingwa kuyo kulapha. Because its development of any nation depends on the strategic thinking of those that are in education. For example, sihleli ne-case apha yase-Efata for more than 8 years, ingaxoxa yobulawa ka-principal. Do you know the reason why? Because justice does not have people for sign language. Principal wase-Efata sihleli ne-case enrolled 8 years back. The family could not have a closure on that incident. Why? Because I'm saying the state capacity on sign language is questionable. As they were presenting here in ndiyacinga kanene ba is Aram. Ziyayikhumbula uba le debate zikuyo ile umphathiswa funeka ephinde wabuya waza kuyo in the context of the mother tongue bilingual. Niphinde nina nibe zi-pioneers zayo. And in essence, it means the country depends on your understanding and deafness on this question. So there is an additional silent phenomenon that is part of what you are engaging today, which is going to be an additional responsibility over what you are agreeing now here. So, thanks everybody, and thanks for the effort that has been put. And the ask is because kuzafuneka sibe nenye indlela yokhangela uba sime kanjani epesini. Where can we cut the cake so that we can ensure that this milestone does find its rightful place in the broader agenda of government. The problem also banayo yoba, once you don't do that, again uzo blackmailwa goba zi-policy champions, but without an implementation plan that is coherent.